On this episode, we are talking about 2013's Man of Steel as we start our road to Snyder Cut. We're going to be talking about purpose, identity, the humanizing of Superman, and much more. I'm Captain Nostalgia, and this is the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. Dust off your cape, take flight, the show starts right now.
Hey, we are talking Man of Steel today. I am here. I am Dan Rockwood. We also have Captain Nostalgia, Celeste Davis, and a very special guest, Mike from Resolute-Counseling. So welcome, everyone. Mike, how are you doing today?
Dan, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. This is exciting.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, man. This is cool. This is exciting. This is a movie that I have not revisited in nearly 8 years at this point. So I just rewatched it last night, and man, I was so happy to go back to a Henry Cavill and just seeing him be Superman. That was a great time.
Yeah, it was the same for me as well. I just recently got done watching it a couple of hours ago, and I remember being just mostly lukewarm on this film, like understanding that Henry Cavill was definitely the best guy to pick to be a Superman, and then also loving Zack Snyder's visuals, but the story just wasn't hitting me yet. But on this recent rewatch, I finally was like, okay, this is what everybody was trying to tell me. This is why I've been fighting against for so long. I couldn't help but fall in love with this film.
Josh, you're a big DC guy, and I know you love Batman, you love Superman. How does this movie fall for you, especially when we have so many other Superman properties between comics and films and shows even to compare it to?
Man, so I was really thinking about this in terms of like when we started recording, and not that I have anything against the MCU at this point, being like 12, almost 13 years into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I feel like there's a little bit of oversaturation. I don't know if I'm like alone in that, but you only have like 9 or 10 movies in the DC Extended Universe, and kicking this off with Man of Steel, I really enjoy I feel like this film is aged really well. Much like Celeste said, like I really enjoyed this movie as a fan when it first came out, and I've occasionally gone back to it, but it's never been something that I've been like really hyped about when it comes to this time. But this rewatch, like it hit me on every emotional cylinder. And Henry Cavill, I'm gonna say it, I know I'm gonna get under some people's skin. Henry Cavill is the best Superman, and Man of Steel is the definitive Superman story, because it's not just a Superman story, it's a intellectual character study on what it's like to feel alienated and search for identity and purpose in this crazy workaday, just fast-paced society.
I think you're going to have some Christopher Reeve purists coming after you after those statements. But no, I agree with you. I mean, I think Henry Cavill, first of all, one of the most physically fit, impressively muscled and well-built actors I've ever seen. But he's a huge nerd, and he gets so into his roles. And so seeing him have the opportunity to play a superhero like this, he clearly took it so seriously. And I have a couple behind-the-scenes things that we can get into later just about him preparing for the role and what he really brought to not only Superman but to Clark Kent. And there's so much cool stuff that this movie does that I had not seen before. And there isn't really a Superman movie that I dislike. I especially really enjoyed Superman Returns with Brandon Routh. Like, I thought that was a fun movie. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I'm in the fan base of that. But Man of Steel just takes it to another level, you know?
Josh, I think you disagree.
Let me say that Superman, Brandon Routh, no problem with him. He was excellent in as Kingdom Come Superman in Crisis on Infinite Earths last year. But God, Superman movies from Christopher Reeves up until not Man of Steel, Superman Returns, they get progressively worse. Are you telling me that you like Nuclear Man? That you're okay with the Richard Pryor Superman 3? Superman 4, Quest for Peace, a movie that bankrupted a studio? I'm sorry, I'm very passionate about this.
I love bankrupting studios, man. Don't you just down with capitalism? No. I think of those, Superman 1 and 2 I think are the best of those, and they're really good. The original Superman movie still holds up today. I think that there's definitely a lot of movies from back then look dated in a lot of ways. That film, you can still watch that today and fully enjoy it as a superhero movie. I think they did that good of a job really putting it together.
Yeah, I just want to chime in, though, that you use that term alienated, and there's a lot about the movie that talks about him being an alien and what that means and being rejected and never really fitting in. And I just love the emotional connection that you make to all the characters, including, the movie starts off and Russell Crowe is in it, right? And you're reminded of how amazing of an actor he is, and the whole scene of all of them on Krypton and the feeling and emotion you get from everyone on that planet and what it means then to them to have this child and how important that is for them to send that child off. And being a father myself, and when I first watched that movie however many years ago it was, back in 2013, I don't think I had the same connection as I do to it now, being a parent, but you just feel the emotion from Kal-El's parents, and it's just this unbelievable feeling you get. And then the whole movie, you guys are absolutely right. It is aged well. You watch certain movies from even 10, 15 years ago, and I don't feel like they have the same connection when you rewatch them. But this one was fantastic.
I think the big critical factor of this film for me that makes it different than other superhero films is that most of the time when you have a film dealing with aliens and humans, you're mostly seeing it from the perspective of the humans. How do they deal with the alien? How do they become comfortable with it? But in this, you see the alien. How is he becoming comfortable with the humans? How is he going to find his place in this world where if someone knows what he really can do, it's going to change everything that we thought made a human, and he's going to be looked at as a pariah, someone who just stands out from the rest and who's never able to integrate himself. There's a part towards later in the end of the film where there's a guy who's questioning Superman and him being a hero, and oh no, it's General-Zod. He tells him what do you know about being here? And he tells him, hey, I'm more as American as anybody here. I grew up in Kansas. I cheer for the Kansas City Royals. I'm more human than anybody here. And this whole film is more just about Superman trying to find out if he can coexist along with humans. And it speaks to us as humans how we should learn to coexist among each other. We see now that there's division and there's fighting amongst different people when they should understand that we're all the same and that we have to learn how to coexist in order to make this a better world.
I think this
intro.
Go ahead, Dan.
I just want to say this intro almost reminded me of Aquaman in some weird ways. Just maybe it's because he spends the first part of the movie just at sea, on a fishing boat, and then they're out at the oil rig that catches fire and everything. And it's I was waiting for Henry Cavill's voiceover to just be my father was a lighthouse keeper, my mother was a queen. They were never meant to be together. And it's it felt so good, and it was really just a nice this is what started that. This is what kicked off all of those other movies that we now know and enjoy and got to see, the team ups in Justice League, and the very purpose we're doing this, we're going to get the Snyder Cut in March of this year. So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on there, and it's just so cool to kind of see the origins of this cinematic universe that they started to build.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Dan. I love so much of how this movie is able to kind of really take elements of it and mold them to other things that within the DC universe. One of the things that I noticed that of that particular is there's a sequence between Jor-El and Kal-El where they're having the it's when he first gets into the Fortress of Solitude and he's into the ship for the first time, and Jor-El is kind of showing him the animated history of what would be like how Krypton was, and like how the House of El plays into that stuff. And you would go on to see other animated sequences later in Justice League, in Wonder Woman, in Aquaman, in Shazam, and you don't ever really think about like that started here at Man of Steel. Like that has been a cornerstone to these DC extended universe films. And but to Kalessin and Mike's point about the alienation that this film is able to bring, I think it's a really it's interesting talking about Man of Steel, because Man of Steel is the only Superman movie where you're taking a notoriously bright, charismatic, hopeful character and humanizing him in ways that we've never seen him before or even since. I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit, how this journey of Man of Steel continues into BVS on the next episode, but who doesn't connect with that feeling of alienation? You know, how many of us have ever kind of stood in a room and just never felt like we blended in? And, you know, when I think depression is something that every one of us on this call have felt, you know, how much of us have felt that alienating feeling when you're going through those seasons of depressions. There's so much hopefulness within this movie, but this movie shows that you really have to go through questioning and kind of those seasons of doubt and depression before you can kind of understand and be comfortable with who you are. And I think that Snyder was a bold man in making that decision with a character like Superman, of all pop culture icons.
I love how Clark Kent goes to a priest when General-Zod wants him to turn himself in, and it's like he needs guidance. And I think that's a really good scene showcasing just like the mental health importance of just checking in with yourself, but with another person. And it also just, I mean, it opens up the interplanetary world of, is he talking to a priest because he knows this is someone that humans go to for guidance, or was he brought up Catholic? Like, does he believe, like, he's evidence that other planets exist, that there's more out there? And so in terms of his religious beliefs, like, the movie doesn't dive into that, but I love that regardless of how he feels one way or the other, it's like he recognizes he needs help, and he is really, apart from Lois Lane, the first human that he opens up to, and he just says flat out, like, I'm the one that General-Zod's looking for, and I don't know if I should turn myself in or not, and I need help making that decision.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of go back to what Josh was talking about with the depiction of Superman, because it's a very hard job to get down a character like Superman and making the audience sympathetic to what he's going through, because for one thing, Superman is almost undefeatable. I mean, he can take bullets, he can go through fire, he has X-ray vision, he can fly, he's the strongest man in the universe, he can do almost anything. And how does somebody like me, a mere Homo sapien, how do I get comfortable with that? How do I get acquainted with this guy? And I think the thing that Zack Snyder does is that he introduces these flashbacks throughout the whole overall story that adds more to the journey of Kal-El, and how has to live into this world where he has to stay hidden in a sense. And, you know, you get the words of wisdom from Jonathan Kent, and, you know, he inspires almost the idea of heroism and sacrifice in Kal-El by the tornado scene, which gets lampooned a lot, and people wonder, like, well, why does he sit there, let himself die? And it's like, if you're a parent, like, if you ever become a parent and you have a kid, most parents will tell you that sometimes, in the rare instance, you wouldn't have a problem sacrificing your life for a kid. You know, if it's to make the kid have a better life, to give them the opportunity that you never got, or to keep them safe, you'll do anything for your child. And that's what I felt in that scene, where Kal-El, he learns the idea of being a sacrifice. And we get that towards the end of the film when, during the final battle, we'll get into it later, but he ends up almost putting his life on the line just to save the Earth for people who don't really understand who he is or doesn't care about who he is and see him as an enemy. He's still willing to give his life to save those people.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like I was saying earlier, I really love those scenes early on from the planet Krypton, but I think second to that are the scenes that you see with Jonathan and Martha Kent. And here are kids, or here are parents that have received this gift, right, of this child that comes on their doorstep. And there'd be so many parents that would have seen what kind of person Superman was as a child and known this and taken it all the wrong ways, right? So we can get an appreciation for how good a people they were in based on how they decided to raise him, and what they did as parents to try to make him fit in as much as possible, even though he had these unbelievable gifts. And that scene, I guess it was after the bus scene where, young Clark Kent's all upset and saying, what does this mean? Are you still going to get to be my dad or something like that? And he looks at him, he says, you'll always be my son, right? And he brings him in and hugs him. And Celeste, you're making great points in that and saying, like, it's hard sometimes to relate to Superman. Like, I think I've always been more of a Batman guy in a way, because there's like that obvious story of tragedy there, and you realize Batman's a human being, and he just happens to be really rich, right? But with Superman, I think I related so much more to the character because of all of these cut scenes going away to what he was like as a child and what he had to deal with. It certainly made him feel much more human.
There's a particular flashback in particular where he is discovering his X-ray vision for the first time. And he's so overwhelmed in this classroom setting that he ends up actually running and hiding in a closet. And his mom, Martha, comes and she knocks on the door and he says, "The world is too big, Mom." And she says, "Make it small, focus on my voice." And every time I watch that scene in particular, I think it's such a beautiful allegory for depression, because depression, at least when I've gone through it, has this capability of just like feeding me all these like negativities, like I'm not good enough, I don't have people that truly love me, I don't have people that I can turn to, like I would be better if I wasn't here in the world anymore. And like, granted, they don't get to that dark of that degree, but for people listening right now, you might be experiencing depression that goes that dark. And it's one of the things that I've noticed in my own journey of decompressing depression has been the fixation on something positive and flipping that perspective. And so here you have a kid that is just overwhelmed by everything that he's currently experiencing, and he's told just to focus on the sweet sound of his mother's voice. And I kind of wanted to open that up, is like, what are things that you guys can do, like, or what are things that like listeners can do, or like what are things that like you guys have personally gone through to kind of like focus and to make the world a smaller place to where depression doesn't feel so overwhelming? Almost
as a joke, but it weirdly works. There's an episode of American Dad where a couple of the characters are on a drug trip, and one just says, tell me I don't have to stay in this room. Tell me I don't have to stay in this room. And the other character's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I'm freaking out, man. Just tell me I don't have to stay in this room. And he says, okay, you don't have to stay in this room. And he goes, okay. Oh, thanks, man. That was close. It makes me feel better. And I think about that, and I'll say that to other people. It's like, look, no matter what's going on, no matter what you're upset about, like, you don't have to stay in this room. You're not trapped where you think you're trapped. You have options, and you can go and do what you need to do. For me, I love when I'm able to talk to friends and people that I trust and I'm able to get in contact with. But other times, it's just putting my phone away and booting up a video game or reading a book or just something to allow myself to kind of process whatever I might be going through.
For me, it's a technique that I recently learned, like when I was scrolling through Reddit, and they were asking people for advice about how do you deal with stress, how do you deal with like everyday problems and depression. And a person came to this conclusion. They said that whatever is going on in your life, trust me, it's not that serious or not that worrisome. Just think about it for 5 minutes. If after 5 minutes, it doesn't really affect you that much, then let it go. If after 5 minutes, then find a way to deal with it in a healthy way. I feel that not only is the problem of being silent about our problems is a problem in itself, but it's about the way that we sometimes handle it and get it out and express it. Sometimes it can be very harmful, such as when people who do self-harm, or other times where people go in to get into fights, or they have a propensity to do violent acts to get out the pain and the aggression they're not able to release. So I feel that it's very important for also to just take, a deposit of your mind and try to focus on things that you can control, not things that you can't control. And also, if you need that help, talk to somebody, talk to a friend. And if you can't find a friend, talk to a family member. Or if not, just try to reach out to somebody, because trust me, somebody out there understands what you're going through. Every day we're always fighting an inside battle. And it's very important for us to recognize when we do have a problem that it's not the end of the world, and that we also can reach out for help.
Yeah, I think you all are making really, really good points, and there's so many things that I agree with. I'll just try to add a couple little things here, but for me, definitely, I think one of the biggest things is just accepting that whatever I'm experiencing, whatever I'm dealing with, is probably okay in the moment, and just to sit with it a little bit. So I think minimizing shame is a big deal. Things can be made worse when you're feeling frustrated or upset about what it is that you're experiencing in the moment and trying to run away from it, or trying to stuff it away, and or feeling embarrassed like no one would understand. So next to that, though, once I've kind of understood what it is that's frustrating me or what I'm dealing with, and I've kind of accepted it for what it is, I know there's something I got to do about it. So having some tools in place, having a process for how I might think about it. Like I think a couple of you are acknowledging, I need to understand, is this a serious thing? Is this something that, that I know is a reality? Is it something that has evidence to back it up? And I have to have a few people, and I've done that in my life. I've definitely picked a select group of people that I know respect me and care for me, and aren't going to make fun of whatever it is I need to talk about, but they're going to listen, and they're going to, if anything, maybe offer a little bit of guidance, but if nothing else, they're just going to listen. And sometimes by talking to someone, that makes a big deal. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's been a big mental health practice for me, has been making sure that everyone that works with victims and villains, it is having healthy mental health, but also at the same time having people in my corner that, if I'm going through issues, I can just turn to them and kind of vent it and then problem solve. I think that venting and problem solving have helped me keep healthier relationships, and relationships that are actually going to be lasting as well. And that's something that I think that when in terms of relationships, we see Clark struggle with so much. There's a part in here where Lois has the encounter, and she's trying to... She has this voiceover where she's recounting, and she's talking about how Clark's history was, falsified, and he basically was like a ghost, and she compares trying to find him to trying to hunt down a ghost. And you see the kind of closer that they get, the more that he's able to really trust her, and we see how that trust plays out in BVS and also in the theatrical cut of Justice League, even to an extent. And having those people in place, it really does make a difference, because I think the reason that Clark was really scared to kind of let people in was because of those things that the fears that Jonathan had over him. No, they're not gonna accept you, or they're gonna shun you, or they're gonna be afraid of you because of what you can do. and really making sure that you're choosing the right people to be vulnerable with that are going to actually improve your mental health and not damage it. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Lois is an amazing reporter. I feel like canonically throughout the series that's just true, but especially in this movie and when she's trying to hunt down those leads and figure out who this person is and where did he come from. Sure, there's a lot of time skips, but it's like so quickly she's able to just hone in, looking into source after source after source and kind of backtracking all of those little jobs that he did and people who knew him and whispers of just like the strange things that they saw, to finally when they track down one of his schoolmates and she's able to actually find out where he lives and uncovers his whole identity. I want to say it might be in Superman Returns, Lois, her Pulitzer is from an article she writes about Superman, and that's how she wins it. In this movie, she references that she already has one, and I'm just curious what that article was about. If it wasn't Superman related, what did she write where she's already this hugely established reporter and can go to these incredibly remote and dangerous places to get the stories? That was just like one of the world building parts of this that like I thought was really interesting.
Well, it goes back to the canon of the comics with Lois and the Pulitzer and the status that she accumulates within the Daily Planet. And it depends on which versions you read, because you have some versions where she hasn't won a Pulitzer prize yet. And then you have what we have here with Amy Adams, where she does. So every creator has interpreted her different. But it basically just means that like she's like top of her game, kind of, and that's why she has won the Pulitzer when we meet her in Man of Steel.
Yeah, I have to say that this depiction of Lois Lane is something that I also fell more in love with this time around. I mean, we'll probably get to it when y'all get to Batman versus Superman, but one of the things that my criticism about that film is just the way that they made Lois Lane into nothing more than just another female character that just has to be saved. You know, in this film, she actually does something. You know, she's actually able to get herself out of being in trouble. You know, there's a scene where she gets kidnapped towards the later half of the film, and of course she had Jor-El's guidance, but she was able to get herself out of the ship and get back to the military and come up with a plan on how to stop General-Zod and his Kryptonian soldiers from destroying Earth. She's given things to do, and she's showing a lot of strength, and she's also a good support system for Clark Kent himself. Not just Clark Kent, but also for Superman. Superman, this is where we see that he gets the inspiration to save the world, to go hard, because he has somebody like Lois Lane in his corner.
I feel like when after all this is happening and Lois meets with Clark, and then there's that whole issue with the UFO appearing over Earth, right? And it's news breaking and no one knows what it is. And then on every stream, on every device on the planet, General-zod starts broadcasting this really ominous message that genuinely for a Superman film I felt was really terrifying. And it kind of makes me want to see what Zack-Snyder or what this company would do with a DC horror film. I feel like there's some good villains and some good stories that they could definitely source from, but if they went like just a hardcore like horror film, especially about an alien invasion, like that's terrifying. And that 5-minute part of this movie made me feel that they could do a really good job with it.
Well, as long as it doesn't get stuck in development hell, James Wan is producing the first DCU horror movie that is a spinoff from Aquaman with The Trench. So,
that's right. So
fingers crossed that still happens. But I'm all about DC horror. I think it would be really cool. What a way to introduce General-zod to a new generation.
Yeah, I remember seeing the teaser trailers for this film, and I remember they used the General-zod broadcasting his message as a teaser for Man of Steel, and that was the first piece of media that had got me like, okay, this is like going to be a different Superman film. I mean, you like just the way that you're not able to really see his face. It's just full of like static and bits and pieces of just matter, but he's still just very intimidating just by the grovel of his voice. And the credit goes to Michael Shannon. And yes, his performance may be hammy at sometimes, but it works.
The character is Zod for sure. I think was the Superman 2 is where Zod was in that one.
Terrence Stamp.
This was an improvement, I thought, for sure. And Michael Shannon's character, just the emotion that was there, and how much he cared about. You could tell how much he cared about his species, his planet, but also how personal it was for him too. And it was just obvious in the scenes that they had, not only the fight scenes, but also just the interactions that they had with each other. And it was kind of cool to see, like when it first starts out, like they bring Superman on the ship and they're talking to him, and it's almost like it was like this very like cordial meeting, at least initially, like, hey, you want to join us, you can come with us. You're almost like they expected, like, hey, you're with us now. You can come back home to us, like we're here for you. It was kind of a defining moment in some ways. It's like there was a decision to be made here. Superman chose Earth.
I have a question about the sentencing and justice system on Krypton, because when General-zod is captured in the beginning of the film after he attempts to stage this coup, he is sentenced to, is it 300 rotations in the Phantom Zone? And they then, what looks to be putting him in some form of cryostasis and then launching him into the ship off planet. My question is does he remain in cryostasis that whole time? Because if so, he's not aware of time passing necessarily, so all of that time imprisoned, it would just feel like a moment for him, unless there's some other piece of technology part of it that I'm not familiar with. But I've always felt that the original concept of the Phantom Zone was it's a physical dimension that you're trapped inside of, and that is your prison, and you live out your life and your days just cut off from the entire rest of the universe.
It's kind of almost like a magical prison, kind of borderlining like the idea of like hell or Hades. The way that they do it, again, it depends on the interpretation. I just started reading the most recent run of Suicide Squad, and the big bad for the first arc is General-zod, who gets let out of the Phantom Zone, and that's kind of how they handle it. Is it's basically you're imprisoned, and the idea that I kind of took from the way that this film handles the Phantom Zone is the crisis, the freezing that you're experiencing is only until you actually get into the dimension. And then once you're in the dimension, you are aware of time passing and you're going to experience this agony for however long your sentence is.
That's kind of what I thought. So that makes more sense that it's more for them to actually be transported into this prison and be there for however long. Which ultimately ends up saving his life. It would have been a death sentence if they just kept him on Krypton, but instead he's one of the few Kryptonians left in the universe.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of take it back to Krypton in a way, because, I mean, in a manner, we understand that general-zod, the manner that he goes across of bringing back Krypton is destructive and just something that I can't really support ethically, but we can understand the motivation for it. I mean, he sees that his world has been ran by incompetent government. I mean, Jor-El and even general-zod both talk about how the console, they mismanaged the resources on Krypton, and the resources became exhausted, and therefore the planet wasn't able to sustain itself. And you can understand that general-zod, he's displeased by this, because, I mean, who wants to see their people wiped out? Who wants to see their loved ones, gone away because of catastrophe that could have been prevented? So in a way, he's almost like not really sympathetic, especially with what he tries to do at the end, with Superman in their fight, but you can kind of understand what jumpstarts his manner of getting back Superman to restart Krypton.
Also, I also feel like from the other interpretations we've gotten of Krypton, whether it was Donner's Superman or Superman the Animated Series or any of the number of other comic versions that we've gotten, this is the first time that you experience that heartbreak that Mike was talking about earlier, where here you have two parents that have just conceived a miracle for the first time. It's a natural birth. I think Jor-El says that it's the first natural birth that Krypton has experienced in centuries. So the fact that you're holding something that literally is a piece of you and a piece of your love and a piece of your legacy, it makes it that much more heartbreaking. But this is the first time too that I feel like we've experienced a Krypton as vibrant, as lived in, and above all else, that it has an urgency. Because imagine what Doomsday, when the world finally does end on Earth, imagine what that's going to feel like. I don't feel like it's going to be like guys in really bright white robes sitting around talking, just accepting the end's going to be coming. You're going to have this urgency that you see with Jor-El, with Lara, with Zod, with the Council, and that I feel like is really what makes this depiction of Krypton that much more commendable, because Zack-Snyder just does not waste any time. Like, this is the version that we're going to go with and that you're going to love. It's one of the best sequences I think that this film has to offer.
So often we see the scenes of the flashback with a young Superman, and I think that there was a good lesson that was present in these flashbacks. There's the scene where Superman's getting bullied, and the guy's telling him, "What you gonna do, Clark? What you gonna do? Like, hit me?" And you can see in his eyes that the kid just really wants to pulverize this kid, and he has the power to do that. He could destroy anybody in his wake. But he sees his father, and he decides not to, but he has to hold it in. He tells his father, "I wanted to hit that kid so bad." And his father was, "Yes, and I may have wanted you to do it too, but at what cost?" The way you grow up is all dependent on the decisions you make, the good and the bad. You have to understand, like, decisions you make are going to impact the way you see the world. So it's all about making the right decisions. And, turning the other cheek, it's hard. You may have the urge. I mean, you're the all-powerful Uberman. You could do anything. You could destroy anybody if you want to, but it's about being responsible with that power. Like, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, and you see that the limits of his power in you see the limits of, the unlimited nature of his power in that first fight sequence in BVS, where he like doesn't really even put like much muscle in it. Like he just kind of like presses against Bruce's chest, and Bruce just goes flying like 3 miles. Like, this is a guy that literally could just like end you with one finger. And there's another sequence in particular where you're kind of talking about Colus, you know, about how the choices that we make in our youth really affect us into adulthood. And it's the scene where Jor-El is telling Kal-El about the Genesis Chamber and how it predestined everyone on Krypton to have this career, and that's what General-Zod had, and that's the reason why he was so impassioned with that. And Jor-El and Laura believed that a kid could be anything that they set their mind to, and I love that. To me, it kind of almost seemed like an allegory for like how parents try to shape the identity of their children and like pass along like beliefs and convictions down to them. And Mike, you're the only parent here, so like, how did you kind of interpret the Genesis Chamber that we have within this film?
Yeah, I was going to make the same point you did, that the uniqueness of this child being born and how important that was to them, because all of them were just like you mentioned, all predestined to be something else. And in some ways, you know, you might still deal with some of those struggles now as a parent, in a way, because, you know, you could easily get caught up in looking at, well, this is the way the world is, and, you know, so my child's going to have these struggles because of the way the world is, or we, you know, as parents only have so much money or so much status, so there's only so much maybe we can do, you know, for our child. But I think what I appreciated about that whole scene was that definitely there's this emphasis on you get to choose a path, and you get to choose whether you're going to be a good person or you're not. And you have all this power, you have all this capability, and that much was obvious. So Jonathan Kent in particular, and Martha too, I mean, they spoke life into Clark, that, you know, we believe in you and we love you and you're special and you have all this, but you still have to make the choice on what kind of person you're going to be. Which is so true. And as a parent, that's what you do. I mean, you want to build your child up, but at the same time, you have to give them the choices, and then you have to sit back and let them make the choices. So they had to send their son off to school knowing full well what he was capable of. And obviously, they just had to hope that he was going to make the right choices.
And I love when we talked about that moment earlier when he is hitting puberty in just the worst way possible, and all of his powers are materializing, and he's having those moments with the X-ray vision. And I feel like that was actually represented pretty well. I think it was in the pilot episode of Smallville with Tom Welling's Clark Kent was going through that and not understanding, like, why can I see through walls all of a sudden? Why can I see people's bone structure? That's strange. This is a movie that I think really balances the difference between showcasing the origin of Superman, which is something that most of us know at this point, but giving us snippets in kind of a new way of what his life was like, while also showing you this is a new story. This is about this Superman, this character, really trying to find his place in the world and just fit in as literally an alien among these humans. And he spends the first majority of his life just trying to lay low and kind of like as just a wanderer. You know, we see him hitchhiking along the with like truckers and stuff. But then, of course, as time moves on, he starts to get more out into the world and get to know the people around him.
I love the idea of this version of Clark Kent continuously searching for purpose and really taking what Mike and Dan were talking about in, like, what do you do with these powers, and then what do you also do with what your parents your adoptive parents have taught you in your upbringing. Like how do you mix all of that? But he never shies away from being the Superman. And we see that very early in. He's kind of a fisherman of sorts, and they're encountering this oil rig that's caught fire, and he basically like hears the call and goes off and does the Superman thing. Like I enjoy so much of that stuff. And here is but I want to gear this towards a little bit more of the nerd side. Here's a fun fact for you guys that I don't know if you guys know. The scout ship that we see in the first act that Lois goes down to the Arctic to explore, do you know whose ship that is?
I have no idea.
No idea.
Well, thanks to a partnership with Walmart, I want to say, that is actually Supergirl's scout ship. Come down 2,000 years before anyone on Earth, any human ever set foot on Earth, basically.
Interesting.
That is interesting. Supergirl is, apart from watching the show on the CW, I know so little about her plot line and her backstory and everything that goes on, apart from the few seasons that I've seen on the CW.
That's fair. I'm interested to see how they're going to do the Supergirl movie with that little tidbit, because it seems like they're going to try and like reset the universe with flashpoints. I don't entirely know how they're going to do it, but I'm excited, and I am also about it. But I want to ask you guys, we kind of hinted at it off and on, where does Henry Cavill kind of lie within the pantheon of actors that we've gotten to hear Superman, to see Superman with your Brandon Routh, with your Tyler Hoechins, with your Tom Wellings, and Christopher Reeves? Like where does Henry Cavill lie amongst the Supermen for you guys?
I will confess that I haven't seen many of the other Superman adaptations you just listed. Like, I know about Tom Welling. Smallville was pretty popular where I came from in Georgia during my childhood. And, of course, I know about Christopher Reeve. I saw the first Superman, so I know about him. And Brandon Routh, I was never able to buy into him. My baby brother does. He loves Superman Returns. I don't. So for me, Henry Cavill, I mean, he takes it easily as being the best representative of this character. I mean, now what Dan mentioned earlier, I mean, he fits the mold of Superman. And also, he's able to nail even the dramatic, moments of the Superman. Because, I mean, anybody can do, the happy-go-lucky superhero, the charismatic and snarky wisecracking superhero. But it takes a different dimension of an actor to be able to nail the serious and personal moments. And I think Cavill does a good job of doing that.
Yeah, Henry Cavill's tops for me. I remember being a young kid and watching the Christopher Reeve version, and I think he certainly nails it in terms of being a good Clark Kent, and especially in the scenes where he's the reporter, and he's definitely very unassuming and doesn't draw a lot of attention. Kind of has the whole nerdy side to him there, but I think maybe it's just because the story had been modernized and things are better now in terms of how they make it, but I just think Henry Cavill, in terms of the man as a person and just what you sense from him, just that emotional side, because you really think about it, I think we're all mentioning here, it's hard to feel sorry for Superman unless you can connect with the whole emotional side. That's the only vulnerable part to who he would be. Is that emotional and relational part, and he has this ability of, you really get the sense that he really cares about certain people that are in his life, like that's really important to him, his family, and then obviously how that translates to Lois Lane. So he does a really good job with it.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. and you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
In the not-too-distant future, following the rapid succession of World Wars III and IV, plus the hidden horrors of secret World War II, there's not much left. All that remains is a place where folks get together to read and discuss comic books. Sometimes they laugh, sometimes they argue, but they always record and upload their transmissions. You've found one of those transmissions today. Welcome to the last comic shop. Rate, review, and subscribe to our weekly comic book reviews on all the major podcasting platforms at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
Yeah, Henry Cavill does somehow being like the most physically fit human on the planet among them anyways, and still making you feel like that every type of man, like, you know, American from Kansas, like he could be any of us. What I like, and no disrespect to Christopher Reeve, but I do think Henry Cavill is at the top for me for Superman. One of the things that I love about him just as an actor and as a person, and Mike, you mentioned how he's like a big nerd as well, and he, you know, gets really into the roles that he's in. So when he was cast as Superman, he really took this opportunity seriously, and he wanted to showcase the best possible version that he could. So he has two shirtless scenes in the film, which, apart from being incredibly distracting because his abs are just unreal looking. Henry Cavill wanted there to be no digital touch-ups, no CGI. He wanted to portray the physicality of Superman just naturally, the way that he was able to. And so during filming, he had a period of around 6 weeks where he had been eating about 5,000 calories a day to bulk up and gain that muscle. He cut that to 1,500 calories a day for 6 weeks. The end result being he was able to get down to about 7% body fat, which is why his abs pop out as amazingly well as they do. And he really just focused on making sure that looked as good on screen as it possibly could. He also apparently was an advocate for not having his chest shaved. He believed that Superman canonically has chest hair, and so there should be a representation of that on screen as well. So he just like went to really cool lengths to do this movie, and I appreciate that both as an artist and as an actor and just as a person. Like, the commitment that he puts in, I think, was awesome. And the end result like shows up. You know, I think Man of Steel is a really, really solid Superman movie and tells the story really well.
God bless Henry Cavill. Just gonna say that. I feel like this is the first time in any interpretation of Superman on a cinematic level, because obviously the argument can be made for Tom Welling. He had 10 years to perfect that version of Superman and Clark Kent, as did Dean Cain in the 90s with Lois and Clark. And I feel like this is the first time that we've ever gotten a three-dimensional feeling and emotional connection to a Clark Kent or a Superman. Mike, to your point about how you have the Donner's version of Superman in Christopher Reeves, he feels like a product of his time, where he feels kind of like very like bumbling and kind of like almost like slapsticky, whereas Cavell has this like timeless quality to him, because at the end of Superman stories and the origin of and transition of Clark Kent to Superman and being the savior of Metropolis and eventually the world, you have a character that is searching for, what do these powers mean, and what am I supposed to do with them, and what does me being here on the Earth actually mean in the larger grand scheme of my purpose. And that's why I think that Cavell has such a magnitude to him as a character, not just what he brought in terms of the physicality, but also in the emotional side. I feel like we've never seen a Superman like this, and you have fans out there that honestly hate the fact that we got this like very emo, very depressed, dark version of that character. But I think that you need that, because we always think that you have this guy that can literally do anything, and he's just going to go for, being the hero. Well, what happens if he doesn't want to be the hero? What happens if he wants to be the hero in the shadows and, not take the credit, not be in the public spotlight? Like what does his powers really have effect on his own mental health? And I think that they do a great job at really bringing that character study approach to Superman and Clark Kent in Man of Steel, and Cavell really does a superb job in this role.
I'm just realizing that Henry Cavill was in his late 20s when he was filming this movie. He had just turned 30 when it had come out in 2013, and that's like the age I am now, and I'm just more sad that I don't look like Henry Cavill. But someday, I just got to work for it and land a job where they'll pay me a studio pay to work out all day.
It's a good goal to have.
Yeah, that's all it takes. I want to say as amazing as Henry Cavill is, I feel like this movie does a really good job with their secondary characters too. And we've talked about Lois Lane. She actually has the best line in the movie, in my opinion, which is "Welcome to the Planet" at the end when he joins the Daily Planet as a reporter. But I think Martha's portrayal was really good. The editor-in-chief at the Daily Planet, Lawrence Fishburne's character, was great.
Right.
Like the supporting cast of this movie was just really well done.
Yeah, I felt like, by the end of the film, the quality of this film that I really liked as far as the characterization, the supporting characterization, would be the military guys. I mean, how often do we see all these action and superhero films where the military guys are just kind of one note? They're either just too brash for their own good or too serious to be taken seriously. But in this film, we kind of connect with these guys because at first they're afraid, and they should be afraid because this is a power, a force they've never encountered, through their trials and tribulations, being a part of defending America, defending the world. And for them, they have to come at this, well, could this thing turn against us? Could it, like the guy says, it's like, how can I trust you to not act against American interests? Like, how can I trust you to not all of a sudden get mad one day and then destroy us? Because you can do that. And Superman's like, well, you just have to trust me. And you understand that the military is not just these people who want to destroy Superman for the sake of being evil. They want to destroy him because they don't really understand him. But towards the end, when they have the big fight, they understand that this guy, he's on our side. The guy says it's a great line when they find him in the bank and he's walking past all of them. They're lined up and they move out of his way. And this guy's like, this man's no enemy of ours. And they understand that this guy is fighting for us. And that's great to have on your side.
Yeah, you could see that was a little bit of like a turning point too for Superman, because then he realizes, this is my decision now to fight for this planet and for this world. Like, he really embraced that. Once he knew that he had people behind him, he had the military. Like you said, at first they're not sure of him. They're like, we don't think we can trust you. But then obviously it turns. And it's not like they just depended on him to do everything. Like, there was this real fighting spirit that you could sense from the different generals and the colonels and all the other soldiers who were there. They're like, we're going to do everything we can, even though they're shooting. Like, some of those scenes, I did have to laugh at some of it because, they're shooting all their guns and it's just doing absolutely nothing to Zod and the other two. And but they didn't give up. And they're like, we're in this together. We're going to fight side by side with him.
I also think it poses like a good question, like, would we truly understand how to react to alien life forms if we encountered someone like Zod, who you have is like really hostile, and then you have Superman that's fighting for the interest of America? I feel like it'd be like a really difficult situation to be kind of placed in. It's like, what side do I agree with, and how can I truly trust, like you were saying, Mike, like how can I trust that you're not going to turn against us? And it's about having the faith and the ability to say, hey, you're this all-powerful being, like, I'm going to trust you are not going to turn against us, fingers crossed.
It reminds me of a debate I had with a friend back in high school about Independence Day, and he felt that it was very absurd and unrealistic that the world would come together to fight off an alien threat. And I said, no, you don't understand. When it's for the common good and we're coming together to fight off an invading force, of course, like, humans will put their differences aside and fight together. The past year of the pandemic has proven that I was wrong, and human beings will never come together for their own best interests. And I think we're completely screwed if a more advanced alien civilization ever comes and comes down to attack us. Because, yeah, you're not getting our governments to cooperate. The scientists maybe, but not the governments.
I mean, we all united over Tiger King.
God, that in 2015, when everyone was so committed to not spoiling Star Wars for people when The Force Awakens was coming out, like, every once in a while you get one thing where everyone can align on. And yeah, Tiger King was a weird one. The beginning of this pandemic was so strange, man.
Yeah, and then we also had Parasite winning Best Picture, which most people end up coming around. But watching this film was almost like wish fulfillment. It's like, I kind of would like to see that in this film we can replicate this, but given the current events, I just don't see it. And it makes me kind of sad because, I mean, Superman, we're not just seeing his personal journey. He's also teaching us about how humanity, we can be together. We can fight for one another. We can honor one another. We can respect one another. We can sacrifice one another. I mean, towards the end, when one of the military guys, he's able to take down the Earth machine in Metropolis, he tells the woman, he says, a good death is deserved. And he is willing to die on a sword to save millions of people. It just makes me wish that, in that world I could feel comfortable in saying that, yes, we have people that can do that. And we do have people, but not enough. There's so much division amongst a large group of people that we're not close to having this commodity that we see in Man of Steel.
Yeah, and, we're joking about it, but you look at things like how divided we are still on issues of, like, abortion, the, LGBTQ plus rights, even the racial injustice and, like, civil unrest that we were seeing last year and, like, still to this day, kind of is proof that, like, I think that we all have these different ideas and we're not ready to kind of put together the commonwealth, for lack of a better word. Like, we want to stick to our own ideas and we always want to be right. We don't know how to be wrong, so to say, or as Lex Luthor quotes in BVS, I don't know how to lose.
Yeah, man. I wish that it was easier to get people together, but progress takes time, and it's, I think we've made a lot of progress, but there's clearly still a lot to go. And when you're looking at the acceptance of literally someone different from yourself, in Man of Steel's case, the acceptance of someone who is not of this world and someone who's committed to fighting for the people of this planet, I feel like this story, it shows how people are able to come around to that. And once the military starts to trust him, and ultimately, I guess once the government starts to trust him, the people start to put some trust in him as well.
Yeah, the sense of trust is just is gathered, immediately. I mean, it goes to show you that if you have leaders, if you have people that are trustworthy in their higher positions, then the people will follow. All the people need to see is someone who's going to stand up for the right morals, the right responsibilities, making the right choices. Being somebody that a person could look up to. I think mostly the amount of division we have now is the lack of good leadership. We're dying to have good leadership, people we can follow and look up to, people who stand for something, people who are not willing to be bought out by a dollar amount, people who are able to be strong and lead and not criticize and be judgmental.
It's also, I feel like it's hard to be like a true leader in some sense, because like there's almost this entitlement that because we've achieved or unlocked this level of leadership, that everything that we once were is beneath us. So it's like if I hit the lottery for the first time and then like looking at people in more impoverished areas with just a lack of sympathy because they're stuck there. And I always think that for me, like as a leader, whether I'm doing it here at Victims or in my life or in my home, I always, I liked the idea of a good leader is someone that is never leads by example first and foremost, and is humble enough to come down to, work amongst people that might be lower on the totem pole than them, or might be on like a different wavelength, because you want to be an effective leader. It comes from getting in and doing the work to be perceived as a leader of the people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one reason that, again, if we look at this film, the Man of Steel film, and you start to, it challenges you in a way that you start to think about, well, if I had that type of power, and because God knows I've dreamed of it, when I was younger, there would have been times I would have loved to have had the power that Superman had, but would I have tried to do it for good? Would I have tried to do it in a way that would have been a healthy thing? I don't know. I'd like to think that I would now, if I had that, but it really does bring up a good point of like what are the people we admire, and what are the people that make a difference in the world. And it's those that are humble and that care and that are compassionate. And sadly, we don't see that typically. The leaders that we see now can easily be bought for a certain price. They tend to make decisions for financial reasons or for other reasons like that. And then, there certainly are a lot of obvious things we can see that are wrong with that. So again, looking back at that Clark Kent character and the Superman character, because in a lot of ways they were the same. Clark Kent is Superman, right? I mean, there's the qualities of who he is as a good person that also come out in how he leads as Superman.
I feel like that there's an elephant in the room, guys, that we haven't spoken about, and I wanted to pose the question. So now that we see that Superman is being brought back again, and we have J.J. Abrams on as the producer. Yeah. Ta-Nehisi Coates is being the writer. What does this spell for the future or the chance of Henry Cavill ever returning back to this role? And is this the end of us getting a Man of Steel 2?
Yes. Because bringing on someone like Coates was someone that when I heard the name J.J. Abrams coming, didn't really pose that big of a surprise, but like bringing in Coates as the screenwriter is really surprising for a character like Superman. And then they're like, oh, well, it's not Clark Kent, it's actually going to be Calvin Ellis, who is the Earth 2 Superman, and he's also a black man. And Coates did an incredible job on his run during Black Panther recently for Marvel Comics. He's a great person to spearhead a Calvin Ellis Superman story. Tom Taylor did an incredible job on Earth 2 in creating that character back in 2011, and I'm really excited to see it. But also Flashpoint has been said Andy Muschietti, who's directing it, has basically said that Flashpoint will effectively reset the DC extended universe as we know it. It will forget everything, but remember, it'll basically reset everything. And so, yeah, I think that our chances of seeing a Henry Cavill Superman coming back, if we get him coming back, it'll be possibly in HBO Max forms, but I think the days of him flying across the big screen are dead in the water.
That's so disappointing to hear. I hope we get him back someday to do something. We'll have to wait and see, but I agree it's not looking good, but I can hold out hope.
All right, well, before we end this, this is the road to Snyder Cut, so I'm going to ask you guys, do you guys know the hidden elephants or hidden person that hides among... Let me rephrase that. I'm going to come back in. Hold on. Since this is the road to Snyder Cut, do you guys know which hidden Justice League member is featured in Man of Steel?
Can't put my finger on it.
Don't know.
I can't think of it, no.
This is the follow-up question. Do you guys want me to ruin it for you, or would you guys like to be surprised in Justice League?
I'll say ruin it. I'm curious right now.
Yeah, let's go for it.
You can tell me. It's fine.
General Swanwick is actually John Jones, a.k.a. Martian Manhunter, the last Martian of Mars in this movie.
Oh, I heard about that. Yes, I heard about that.
That's incredible.
So, an alien is also overseeing the United States military services as well. And all right, I think that's going to... Go ahead, Colas.
I know, I just last question. So where do y'all put this among your ranks in the DC Extended Universe? For me, it's number one. I put it at number one.
Are we counting Shazam as part of this?
Yes.
Yes.
Shazam would be number one for me. Aquaman number two. Man of Steel would probably be number three, but that's a close tie with the first Wonder Woman film.
Yeah, for me, I'm glad you mentioned the Wonder Woman movie because that first one I think is tops for me, but Man of Steel is second.
I'm gonna rank it at number two. Also, I'm not going to let you guys know what my number one is. You guys will have to just keep trucking along with us through the Snyder Cut DCEU series that we're currently doing. We're going to be back with Mick Manhattan from the Scene Snobs to talk about Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, the follow-up to this movie. But, Mike, thank you so much for joining us and bringing... all of your fandom and wisdom to this episode. Where can people find you online?
So I have a Facebook page if you go into Resolute Counseling, and then also resolute-counseling.com is our website.
Awesome. We will provide links in the descriptions below. But my two amazing co-hosts, where can people find you guys online?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter under the alias Black Nerd Magic. You can also find me on letterboxd.com under Black Nerd Magic as well. You can find me on Facebook as my name, Cales Davis, Caless. And also check out my reviews and past podcasts I've done for Victims and Villains, and also check out reviews, and also check out the Filling Film podcast.
All of which we will also provide links for in the description below.
And you guys can find me over on Twitter at drock6499. I am also on Letterboxd as well, though I haven't been as active over there recently, probably because I haven't seen a new movie in like a year at this point. But I'm looking forward to brighter days ahead when I can finally get back to the movies, because it's one of my favorite places to be.
Yeah, talk about that's my mental health spot. I love being in the movies. So I loved all of the memes that were coming out last year, where it was I can't wait to walk down the aisle again, and it was like movie posters on each side, and it was like, this is where you get to the theater. Anyways, you guys can find me also on Letterboxd. I'm on Captain Nostalgia, and you guys can follow my 2021 film journey, which has been spilling over to our Instagram account as well. I just got done with my DC animated movie rewatches or watches. So I think Planet of the Apes is next on my list. But you guys can find us over at Twitter, Twitch, wherever you guys get your podcast from, Facebook as well. And you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find all of past episodes, the movie reviews Celeste was talking about. You guys can also find all links to all of our social medias, and most importantly, you guys can find our suicide prevention resource library as well. So thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you guys. We're going to go fly high with Man of Steel, and we'll be back crashing to the ground with BVS. Have a good one, guys.